I do have to admit that when it comes to Fall of a CIPHER, I've taken a bit of a wonky road in how I've covered their artistic publications. Because for me, again, it was an early introduction as of a couple months ago that I first even heard the name Fall of a CIPHER. I'd never come across it before. But it was through, as is the case of many European artists, it seems, and I've spoken about this quite often, especially as it pertains to Fall of a CIPHER and Linda Toni Grahn, their former vocalist in more specificity, Mortimia has been the gateway for me to learn about so many different artistic talents within the European metal scene working today. Mortimia, for those of you who don't know, I've covered him a lot in this channel. I've got a wide body of his work I've responded to, but he is a Norwegian one-man gothic symphonic metal artist heralding from Sirenia. Very enjoyable talent, but his whole model of being able to focus on the music construction while bringing on, and he involves himself in the vocals as well. He's got a great scream in my opinion, but he brings on all these vocalists from other principal groups, wherever they be across the European landscape. And Linda Toni Grahn was one such collaboration through Forever and Beyond, which was a beautiful piece and was a great introduction to her. And that's what launched me into, I need to find out more. It was that track specifically, and I do credit that piece actually entirely in terms of the collaborative model that I've run with in regards to knowing one artist, and then in part because of my motivation for this channel wanting to expand my music coverage out quite a bit and explore new talents. I think it was really her track, like in the beginning, that actually I think what else is there with the Zola Koch cover. I think that was probably the first one initially, but maybe Forever and Beyond really launched it more so. But with that song, my immediate compulsion was to look at, more of what Linda Toni Grahn has done. And for example, that's where I came across Fall of a CIPHER, because it was an associated group with her for quite a while. And, with other groups, again, that's been the same model as well, with other collaborations that Mortimia has done. And I've loved that model, by the way. I love how, again, collaborations are a great asset to discovering new talents. And again, with Linda Toni Grahn, Fall of a CIPHER was a great immediate listen. I've covered 3 tracks on this album, but again, the order here that I've covered these pieces is a bit wonky, because I started with The Rising, and then I proceeded to Valkyria, and then I went to Rewind the Stars, which is that one-track release, and that's in the video. In fact, I found out then that Linda Toni Grahn has since parted ways, and now she's doing work through Anima Veil, which I've also since covered that first single, They Are Gone, and it was great, beautiful piece. So again, the order here, maybe, it would have made more sense to put this in between Valkyria and Rewind the Stars. That was the order in which I covered said works, because that was, I believe, the release date. But I happened upon it a bit later. But, I figured it'd be kind of fun to rewind a bit, because, no pun intended in terms of the Rewind the Stars connection. I really liked Fall of a CIPHER, and I would love to explore more of their work. I'm probably going to listen to maybe the remainder of their initial album on my own, but this is another single. I figured, why not, right? Linda Toni Grahn is a very enjoyable talent to listen to, Swedish artists. I happen to listen to, a lot of Swedish artists, and I've come across many more, it seems, in other collaborations as well that I've covered on this channel. Again, the European landscape, I've spoken about it many times, is a favored realm of music, especially within the metal scene for me. I've just come across so many artists that are seldom talked about in my circles, and I do love, as music is my favorite art form of choice, apart from all the other ones I cover on this channel, I cover quite a broad range. Music for me is the one that's always been the most vital to my life, and I've always felt the deepest connection to. And with Europe, it's just been such a treat to wander from artist to artist to group, and learn more about what's out there and broaden my perspective and my playlist, even though my phone is quickly running out of storage space. I'm seeing the number trickling down. Anyway, I'm very happy at many of the groups that I found, including Linda Toni Grahn's artistic endeavors through Fall of a CIPHER and Anima Veil, respectively, in regards to partnership. So again, though, I figured, because I love those tracks so much initially with Fall of a CIPHER, why don't we rewind a bit and try out one more song, which I understand also got a lot of attention. The Pioneer. I remember seeing a lot of regard for this one. I don't remember from where, but I'm going to go ahead and cue up this song. Perhaps for you, this is the first introduction. Again, I've said before many times, I hope that in some capacity, this channel, as I make music more dominant here in terms of a role, and I've had that ambition for some time, and as of 2022 I've really manifested that vision quite well, and in 2023, God willing, that will proceed forward as well and continue and become a much more dominant presence here than by comparison in the past when I started this channel several years ago. I've always had that ambition to bring it on better, and it's finally taking shape. And I hope that in part, my mission is to come across not only other fans of artists that perhaps, again, I don't find most connection to in my personal life, because, nobody really in my circles has the music taste that I do. But through music coverage, it's been great to learn about other fans out there and meet some of you in the comments section and have that interaction. I thrive on that connection. And it's been so great to feel like, hey, there are other people in the world out there like me who love metal and maybe gravitate towards the European scene. I'm not as much of an anomaly as I think in this realm. Well, in some cases, I still am. But it's also great as well if my channel in any way can provide this to form or forge new fans and perhaps create paths for you to discovering talent that you've been yearning to hear and you just haven't known where to look. There's talented artists across the world, and Europe just has so many, but how often do you hear Europe talked about? Especially in my circles, it's never mentioned. But lucky for me, I found where all that talent is, and it is in the European landscape. And again, there's other places as well, but Europe just has such a wealth of talent, and I hope to share in some capacity that enjoyment and exposure with you if I can. So hopefully you can become a follower of a CIPHER /AnimeVale /Linda Tony Grahn fan as well. Alright, The Pioneer. I'm going to go ahead and cue up this song, and as I understand, this is also the lyric video I'm going to be pulling up, which, again, if you're not familiar with how I format my music reactions, I do try and provide every accommodation to suit listener taste, and some of you might like to read along with the piece, and so normally I would have to put the videos in myself, or the video, but the lyrics, in that case, it's provision afforded by the group. So we can read along, and I haven't read the lyrics, by the way, in advance. This is very much a fresh take on every measure, other than me being familiarized with my earlier coverage of Fall of a Cypher to their sound. Okay, here we go. I will say the purple color schemes seem to be like an early tease to AnimeVale, because that's what they've relied on too. And it fits very well in the color palette of this channel. Yeah, you haven't noticed, purple is the primary color choice I use. Great electronic vibe, I mean, that's very consistent with some of their earlier projects. I really like the intensity to it and how it's blended to the music. Although I'm very selective when it comes to electronic. But I've loved this. The veiled voice, I like it. Good effects. Good variants. Oh yeah, again, Linda Tony Grahn has an incredible range. Oh, beautiful. I don't even see purple flames. Great visual. Great transition back to that opening riff. Love it. There's a lot of these European metal songs that really ask all these insightful questions in their narratives. Maybe not in the same way, but they're all individualized, but they kind of have a similar motive, it seems. Similar passion to looking at the future. Great section there, great break for the pacing. Gives it some breath, some room. But this piece really has just so much range to it, in part because of Linda Tony Grahn. Great breakdown here. Again, it keeps the pacing moving forward, but it's just such an engaging effect choice to listen to. Guitar solos? Okay, again, good integration, fits very well. Okay, we're introducing a key change. Are we doing the last measure? There's a lot of European groups that do key changes, especially lately. Yep. Oh. Are we returning? Maybe. Okay. It's interesting to plug that in, midway to the ending rendition of the chorus. But it's interesting. It's a bit different from what I've heard recently. Nice to have a bit of a drop in aggressiveness in that pause. That was beautiful. Great drop of a voice, too. Again, that gives this chorus so much dimension. Love it. I love those the fire burns lines. They're so European. Good summation there with the outro effects. It's a cohesive vision. No wonder a lot of people like that song. It's good. Really good from them. Beautiful single. Really stresses, I would say, a lot of the group's strengths again, even though Linda Tony Grahn has since left. I wonder if Follow the Cypher is still active. I couldn't find clarification on that point. But at the very least, I would say if they did disband, or just to maybe a long pause, they did so with a good conclusion through Rewind of the Stars. That was a great song, but this was the one that came out previously. It's quite exquisite, though. Again, just from the video perspective, I love purple. In terms of a color shade, it really is such a palatable visual. But the piece in itself, I've talked about this on occasion. For me, electronic effects, I'm very selective in terms of the groups that I approach, and I've been far more open to the European landscape because it's oftentimes what I want to see in that realm. And there are a couple American exceptions as well that I can think of off the top of my hat, and groups I've referenced as well in the past by name, though I don't think I've really covered many of their works, but there are talents I've come across that do fit that electronic exception. But for me, I'm not the biggest... If electronic music and electronic tones is not married to a melodic background or a bass line, I find myself in a place of disruption. And so for me, if it's anything akin to what you would hear clubbing, for example, with EDM frenetic beats, it's all noise to me. It's endlessly hectic, distracting. I don't care for it. But if again there is some marriage and dimension to the piece where there's a bond with the music, it's much more attractive. And I'd say with Fall of a Cypher, they qualify, as well as perhaps, in speaking of Swedish music, like Dead by April's done the same. And in fact, I made the comparison as well, whereas Fall of a Cypher is a bit more frenetic. Dead by April breaks more into the hard rock metal territory in terms of aggressive riffs. Fall of a Cypher has that too, but again, it's much more keyboard heavy. It's very technological in their focus, but I'm very enamored by the presence of their tracks, even if, again, they've disbanded since, Linda Tony Grahn has gone over to Animavale, which, again, I think is a very successful first installment with her for They Are Gone. The Pioneer is quite beautiful. Again, the dimension to the piece and the overall visual, again, as I said, was great. It just makes it such a vivid video to watch. But again, listening to Fall of a Cypher, there's a lot of personality to their work. Again, not just the electronic presence, which they do masterfully, in my opinion. There's just such good pacing to the song as well. But Linda Tony Grahn's vocal, she really does have an exquisite range. I'm very enamored by her. And, many of the other female-led bands in the European scene, even though, again, when you're talking about metal, there's a variance. Some get a little more aggressive, others perhaps have more of a bass line, but I've come across just so many talented singers that, I always think of when I think of the European landscape, names that just impress me so much in their, I would qualify, God-given talent. I truly believe that in terms of the groups that I've listed, many of which I've recommended or even covered on this channel. Linda Tony Grahn, I speak at the same respect. By the way, her engagement, that one section towards the end, I'm trying to see which section actually it was, but it was in the last chorus. There was a lot of variance to her voice, and I really loved it. So on this part where her co-vocalist, I guess, says, "A soldier's heart redeemed," and then she launches into the first, the fire burns, and then, yeah, breaking the chains in our soul. The shift in her voice, mesmeric. Like, that just is a gift. And it works so well to the song's flow. It's a beautiful cue. It's a great piece. I mean, again, I was a bit distracted, so I was kind of trying to read along with the message. It seemed like a very thorough... Let me read those quickly, because, I mean, again, I try to... It's sometimes hard to do on a raw take, because it's the first time you're looking at the lyrics. So you try to accommodate, if you're in my position, you try to accommodate every aspect of the music to the best extent that you can, whether it be the vision of the musicality of the piece, as well as perhaps the video, and then mixing that to the song's lyrics. Sometimes, you know, again, as well, when you're perusing the lyrics and meditating on what the artists are saying, if you don't necessarily have inspiration expounded for you by the artists themselves, things become clearer on subsequent listens, and that's been the case of other groups I've listened to in the past. I sense a bit of a war energy in the lyrics in terms of what I'm quickly looking at. Kind of a motivational, inspirational spirit. Very dramatic visual cues in terms of the illustration. Maybe the idea... And I could be completely off base on this, but like in terms of the explicit mention of a soldier, maybe you could extend that to being like somebody, maybe a soldier's not like specific and maybe a military attribution, but in somebody who is a warrior of purpose. Like somebody, that's not a good way to explain it, somebody who's motivated to have a better future, and so they're fighting for that, and they're trying to actualize that vision and make it manifest in their lives, whatever the context might be, whatever the consideration of what they want in terms of a goal happens to be. I listened to this piece and I kind of sense that maybe the idea is that we're saying, like, we're soldiers looking for that fire within us. I think it's kind of the idea. I'm not exactly sure. Again, don't quote me on it. Feel free to maybe clarify. And you know, music, again, and part of the reason I appreciate this art form so much is it is open to interpretation. So perhaps you're reading the lyrics and you're gleaning an entirely different message than I am. I'm just trying to go off, again, maybe a fresh look. And maybe things, again, like I've said, will become clearer upon subsequent listens. But the piece in itself is a beautiful track. It's very dynamic, a lot of range, personality. It's a wonderful work. And again, fits my expectations of what I've become familiar with Fall of a CIPHER. Which, by the way, I didn't know this. You might remember when for those of you who pay attention to my music coverage, you know just how much I've spent in terms of time with European groups. I recently covered, maybe about a month ago or something like that, Blackbriar, longtime favorite. Zorla Kalk is their front lady. I referenced her at the beginning of the video as well for the Mortemia collaboration. She is a wonderful vocalist. She was... in terms of recent releases, she and the group released a single called Crimson Faces, and that was sort of their debut track. It was a beautiful piece, by the way, and again, I covered it, and it was such an exquisite listen. You'll love it if you're into like symphonic metal. It's so good. Or talented, vocalists, which Zora, like Linda Toni Grahn, absolutely is. And like every collaborative artist on the Pandemic Pandemonium sessions from Mortemia, or the COVID Aftermath sessions of what's been unveiled, every artist he's featured is just wondrous to listen to. But with Blackbriar, I didn't know that Fall of a CIPHER had a similar record label in the beginning, because that Crimson Faces release was meant to herald Blackbriar's new association to Nuclear Blast, which I guess maybe is a popular European music label. I like the name, by the way, very intense. Fall of a CIPHER was with them. Didn't know that when I originally started covering, but I found that out after I looked at their thumbnail. I was like, oh, that name's familiar. And as I said previously, I did look up the name of the producer for Blackbriar as well, who I probably aware is associated with Nuclear Blast, at least in some capacity. I've considered groups that are associated with him, and I'm definitely looking at in terms of new music and what I want to spotlight and venture into in regards to new listens. I'm considering a lot of those names, as well as taking many of your suggestions in the comment sections, and all of you have been quite adept at providing a long list of recommended listens. I'm keeping all those in consideration as well, and those will, I'm sure, make their way on this channel at some point as I keep a broad focus on evolving music's presence here on the channel. But with Nuclear Blast, I haven't looked into their specific offerings too much in regards to their label. I'll have to take a look though, because again, like I've said, now Blackbriar is being associated with them, even though again they started earlier on as their own artists, from my understanding. But Fall of a Cypher I absolutely loved, so I think it is worth looking down and seeing whatever groups are associated by record label as well. I mean, that's going to be probably an endless wellspring, but maybe some of their associated acts will appear on the channel. Don't be surprised at all. Again, like Fall of a Cypher has been an absolute treat, as well as many of the other European groups I've spotlighted. In regards to Fall of a Cypher, The Pioneer is a wonderful single. And I do hope, maybe that Fall of a Cypher does come back eventually. We'll see. Again, I think they had a lot of talent when they started. And I think in covering them, again, like many groups, I'm very happy at hearing some of their pieces from Europe. And again, I love being able to promote that as well to maybe audience members who have not been as exposed to European metal as I've been, and I hope to share that same joy with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well down below on the track. If you happen to be maybe a longtime fan of Fall of a Cypher, or perhaps a new listener, whatever angle you come from, if you so choose to provide your disclosure down below in terms of how you approach this track, I would love to hear your perspective down below, as well as your overall thoughts. I think the piece is quite great. And again, like I said, maybe Linda Tony Grant is now with Animavale, and that's, I can't wait to hear more from them as well. But anything really Linda Tony Grant has been with, I've really enjoyed thus far in what I've heard in terms of her music endeavors. She's a very talented artist, and hearing her here with Fall of a Cypher, and the group in itself provided a wonderful track. It's a beautiful listen, as the last tracks I did cover, though again out of order, obviously. It's great to listen to their works. I do hope maybe at some point we get to see more from Fall of a Cypher in the future. We'll see, you never know. I couldn't see any confirmation, like I said, in terms of they fully or formally disbanded or not, so maybe there's that open door. We'll see in time, but from what I've heard of Fall of Cypher currently, I've really liked, and I hope that same elation I experienced just now, that resonates with you as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.